Do you ever wonder how you bridge the gap from your creative dreams to actual execution and seeing the thing come to real life? Today, I have a very special guest, Peter Hainsworth of the Ops Group, that's going to join us to talk about bridging the gap from creativity to execution. Let's get into it. Taking creatives from chaos to clarity. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Creativity Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Pead, creative coach and consultant. I'm here to help creatives know themselves, their process, and their team so that they can create greater things together. Episode 104 is here with a very special guest, like I mentioned in the intro. We'll get to him in just a moment. But before we do, I want to thank you for watching, listening, however you're consuming this content. If you're listening on an audio podcast platform, I would really appreciate a 5-star rating or review. It helps get this content out further to those like yourself who could benefit from it. And speaking of that, why not share it with somebody who you know could benefit from it? If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. I would love for you to hit the thumbs up button. It helps the algorithm, helps get this stuff out to more people just like yourself, and subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of all content that is dropped on here on a regular basis for you. Lastly, if you're interested in anything that you hear today on this podcast, or you would love my help, I would love to offer you a free 30-minute coaching session. You can go to dustinpead.com and click on the Let's Chat button. Those buttons are all over the website, no matter what page you're on. I would love to chat with you and love to offer you a free 30-minute coaching session for your processes and systems and your creative professionality. I'm super excited for today's conversation with Peter. He has a lot of amazing things to share with us, so let's dive right into it now. Well, Peter, thanks so much for joining us on the Creativity Made Easy podcast. I'm glad you're here, man.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be here.
We've been just a little behind the curtain. We've been trying to get this thing scheduled for a long time, and Peter is so popular. It's hard to nail him down, but I'm glad he's here today. Peter is Director of Operations at Ridgeline Electrical in Indianapolis, Indiana, one of the clients that I work with. But also what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today is he is the founder of something called the Ops Group. Peter, what's the Ops Group? What's that all about?
So the Ops Group is actually kind of just like what it sounds like. It's a group for, I know, right? I came up with all these other names for it when I first started. And, at one point it was Director of Results. And that's super cool name, but it doesn't really flow off the tongue. No. And I had someone actually involved with the group who just was like, when I tell people about this, I never can remember the name. So I just called it the Ops Group. And I was like, that's it. Are you okay if I use that for the name? And they were like, yeah, for sure. No big deal. And so the Ops Group is it is a peer group that is designed for folks that are in operations or operation professionals, specifically targeted towards those of us who are making the day-to-day happen, and feel that there are challenges that we face that put us kind of on an island. Yeah. And I won't get too far into it, but the idea is let's get together and talk. Right.
Yeah. No, I love that.
I love the gist of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in any profession or any sector or hobby or anything like that, if you can build community around it, it just creates sustainability and a support system there. And so specifically, as we're talking today, Peter, we're gonna use the lens of creativity because that's what this podcast is about. But for our listeners who are strictly creative professionals, we know that creatives are high visionary people. And that's usually where I come in, right? And it's the reason why Peter and I get along so much is because we make things happen. We get the things done that the high visionaries will cast vision for, and then we'll actually bring it to life for them. And for the organization. So there'll be a lot of talk today about, just in the businesses or in the markets or things like that, or even in the creative landscape of things. Just know that we're going to be using creatives and visionaries kind of interchangeably. So if we say visionary, we're talking about a creative. If we say creative, we're talking about a visionary. With that in mind, Peter, I would love to know what inspired you to even create the Ops Group to begin with. I know we talked about the community piece, but why do this?
Sure. So actually, before I get into that, I have to give you another definition that we'll probably use interchangeably.
Yeah.
And that is when I talk about like a head of operations or director of operations or COO, Chief Operating Officer, or another word that's familiar with the EOS community is integrator. I'm talking about the same person, the same role, right? So the individual who is in charge of making things happen and executing on the vision, right? That's kind of the big picture of those roles. So a couple of years back, Ridgeline Electrical implemented fully into the EOS method of business, which is an operating system. It's set up as an accountability structure, things like that, right? I'm sure, Dustin, you've done more talking about this than I can even go into. So
not a ton of EOS talk on this podcast, but a lot of behind the scenes with the clients for sure. So,
okay. So it is I'll give a high level then real quick. So we are all on the same page, but the idea is it creates accountability and transparency within your organization, right? Yeah. Within that is a operational structure or an accountability structure, they call it, of how the business runs through a, quote unquote chain of command. So as you've said, if you've alluded to, we've got visionary and creative, that would be your visionary within EOS. And then your next person would be your integrator or your chief operating officer, your head of operations, whatever you want to call that. So a couple of years ago, Ridgeline implemented this system. And I have been in operations for the last decade in one capacity or other. However, I've never been an integrator before. So when it was mutually decided from our executive team that was going to be my role taking on moving forward, I started asking a lot of questions that I didn't know answers to, obviously. And I said things like, hey, can you point me in the direction of someone who's done this before so that I can talk with them and, have a mentor and, et cetera, et cetera. Because I've got this structure laid out in the book of how it's supposed to run, but I don't know what questions to start asking first. Where do I even start? Do I start with processes? Do I start with systems? Do I start with leadership? Where do I even go? And the implementer that did the work for us, her name is Jen, fantastic. She goes, I don't really know of a lot of integrators in the Indianapolis area that, you could connect with, because it was a fairly newer concept back when we started. Not many people had implemented at that point. It's much more popular now, much more prevalent too. And so I started asking other people, hey, can you point me in the direction of someone who's done this? Or I even started at some point, asking, hey, is there a group around of people who can do this? And everybody said, no, we don't really know of anybody. A couple months down the road, the answers changed from not really don't know anybody, but you should start it. That's what it went to, is you should start something. And I said, absolutely not. I want to go to learn. I don't want to teach other people because I don't know what I'm doing. And after a couple years of hearing that same messaging over and over again, it finally clicked for me and realized that not only is there nothing out there, but there's a need for this. There are other people who are interested in this. There are other people who would benefit from this as well. So I said, fine. In July of 22, after the urging from my visionary, Blake, and then also my wife and his wife, I said, fine, I'll do it. And I started the ops group. It was very different back then. We had a couple people come in and join me on the first week. The first month, we meet once a month. And I very quickly realized that this was incredibly valuable for multiple reasons. And not just for myself, but for the other people that were there. They found great value from just hearing, hey, I'm not alone in some of these challenges I'm facing.
Right. So let's get down to brass tacks here, because the creative pros that are listening to this right now, the high visionaries, they're a lot of times they don't necessarily understand the effort that it takes to see things through fruition and actually see their vision come to life. They, had success at some point in their life by squeaking out something that everybody loved. And so they go, well, I can just keep doing that again and again. But why do creatives or strong visionary people, why do they need a strong ops person?
Sure. So in order to sustainably continue, right? And I say that because I think a lot of creatives, and at different times in my life, I've been in a position of creative, right? I've been in a position of visionary. when you're in that spot, and if that's where you live all the time, I understand this to an extent, having, the vision of the ops group and building some of those things. We forget how hard it really is at times to, in your words, squeak something out that people love. Right.
Yeah.
It's easy for visionaries and in creatives. And I'm not saying this as a blanket statement. This is just more of a generic, hey, majority of folks are this way. It's easy to forget how hard it is to execute on things.
Yeah. And
when you get into more people, it becomes much more complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so much more complex to do that. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is realizing that as you scale, you can't do it all on your own, and nor should you. As a visionary or a creative, you've got incredible ideas. And I'm sure that a visionary and creative has felt at one point or another, my gosh, I could have so many more ideas and be so much better at putting this out there if I didn't have to just do all the work too.
Right.
So there's some quotes out there saying, and the basic gist is hire people smarter than you.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with that. I would tweak it a little bit. Hire people that are better at doing the things that you're not great at.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Find their strengths, bring them on, and then work together as a team moving forward.
Yeah, it's a touch of humility, right? To be able to say that I'm not great at everything.
Right.
But I think an angle that I've been able to take, Peter, with some of my clients who are creative pros is to go, don't think of it as you're not great at everything. Think of it as what you really want to spend your time doing.
Yeah.
And what you don't want to spend your time doing.
Right.
So most creatives don't want to spend their time doing the things that keep the operational wheel spinning.
Yeah.
Now, if they don't do it and no one else does it, guess what? The wheel stops spinning and there's no progress. There's no moving forward. There's no money making. There's no opportunity, any of that stuff. Yeah, right. Then you're just relying on luck, which is an extreme gamble, right?
Yes.
But when you have this person in place, you could say, okay, I understand. I may not be able to get to the place in humility where I can say like, hey, I'm not good at everything, but I can at least easily get to the place and say, I don't want to do X, Y, Z. I only want to do A, B, C, and I'm going to hand off X, Y, Z to somebody else so that the proverbial wheel can keep going. Peter, why don't you walk us through how a operations person can directly support I'm going to use both of these words, the creative vision. How can we support that creative vision, but also maintain operational efficiency?
Before I go there, do you mind if I back up for a second?
Go, man.
One of the things
I'm just hosting the conversation.
No, you're good. I love it. And I will get there. I promise. But I was thinking about this as you were talking. One of the things that I like to use as a tool to help people get to a point where they're willing to say, okay, I'm not the greatest at this without saying I'm not the greatest at it, is to ask them or ask yourself, what is the one thing that gives me the most energy?
Yeah, that's right.
And then go after that. And then conversely, what's that thing or things that robs me of energy? What is the thing that you find yourself putting off, you find yourself avoiding, even if it's a 30-second task, but you just don't want to do it? Because it takes away the energy from you. Those are the things that you should be bringing other people in to be able to take care of for you.
Absolutely.
That way you can focus on your unique ability as a creative or a visionary to focus on moving forward and driving.
And we'll come back to the question in a second too, but I love that you use the word focus. I was just literally before we hopped onto this podcast recording today, I was writing a report for a client of mine after doing some research into all the things that they're doing. And we've been having these conversations in our coaching sessions about the focus funnel, right? What can you eliminate, automate, delegate, or procrastinate and bring back to the top of the funnel again? And it's the same thing, right? It's like what we first went through a time and energy audit, which is a Dan Martell buy back your time concept, his book, Buy Back Your Time. You go through that audit, you basically write the things down that brings you energy, the stuff that you're taking notes throughout your day of this brought me energy, this didn't. This brought me energy and it was high value. This brought me energy and it wasn't high value. This didn't bring me energy at all and it sucked the life out of me,
Yes.
but it was really high value, or this sucked the life out of me and it was also extremely of no value. So you start to kind of see the quadrants of like, hey, if it sucks the life out of you and there's no value, guess what? Eliminate it. If it sucks the life out of you, but it's high value, delegate it to somebody else. You know what I mean? If it gives you energy, but it's really low value, automate it. And if it gives you energy and it's high value, that's the sector that you need to be focused on. And like what you said, Peter, you need to surround yourself with the right people. But yeah, it's the stuff that you get. And I love too, you said the energy, what gives you the most energy, not what gives you the most joy or happiness, because we know happiness is fleeting, right? There's what makes you happy today as a creative visionary or a person in general, doesn't matter what status you're in. What makes you happy today may not make you happy tomorrow, but it's about what feeds you the energy to continue moving forward. All right. As you were.
Okay. So your question was, now can you restate it?
Yeah, I will. So how does the operational person support the creative vision, but also maintain some operational efficiency? So how do we sit on that balance of, I understand the vision, I understand the creative, let's dream a little, let's live a little, let's get our heads in the clouds for a little bit, but how do they also maintain operational efficiency while being able to get there as well? Sure.
I think that is the question of the
mystery of the universe. I think
I will not sit here and pretend that I've got it all figured out. There is no way in hell that I have. But it's an active, I would almost say day to day type of thing, and part of it is, I think what's easy for the operational professional is to forget the vision, because we want to be so buried in the efficiencies and so much in the process and the systems and making things turn and making things go. It's actually, I think it's a detriment to us to not see that vision.
Yeah.
So part of walking that balance is you as an individual, as the operational individual, taking the responsibility to not own the vision, but have ownership with the vision.
There you go.
The vision becomes part of who you are too, and it will dictate how you move forward on things.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you forget your efficiencies, but it means that you learn to understand that efficiency for efficiency's sake is not the value, is not worth it, right? That's not the point. The point of the efficiency is to make sure you hit the big picture, is to make sure you hit your goals that are put out there, right? That's the point of the efficiency.
Yeah.
And when we separate them, when we separate the vision and the efficiencies and the operations, right, we pull those apart. Now we have two opposing forces trying to work together, going down the same road, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a marrying of both in a very, it's heavy responsibility in the operations person to understand and have a clear view of that vision. And sometimes that's hard to get because we want to just put our heads down, get behind our desks and do our work, right? Yeah. We want to just get done. What it takes sometimes is sitting down with your creative and saying, here's what I think your vision is from my perspective. This is where I think we should go. Tell me, are we on the same page? And in EOS, it's called a same page meeting for that reason.
Yep.
And it's crucial that you stay in those and that you keep that moving forward, because then you truly understand where that vision needs to be to get there, because you're the one responsible for taking care of making sure that you see that vision and execute on it. Right. And your visionary or creative is starting to get a picture of the steps it's going to take to get to that point. So their expectations are set realistically, your expectations are set realistically, and you can move together along that road.
Yeah, it's what we say on this podcast all the time, that you have to learn to ask really great questions, right? And then the method you talked about there too on the same page meeting is a great way to start that same page meeting is to repeat back what you think the vision is, what you think the direction is, and put it in your own words. And then just kind of have that back and forth conversation until everybody goes, yes, your visionary, Blake, is a partner of mine and the culture base as well. And we often in our weekly meetings will have a lot of, this is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Is that accurate? And it's usually 4 or 5 rounds of that before we both understand each other.
Yep.
But you mentioned systems earlier. I want to get into that just for a few minutes here. What are some essential systems that you think every business needs to be able to take the vision and put it into reality?
It's pretty basic, actually, depending on your industry.
Basic to you.
More obvious, but basic to me, that I would say everybody needs. You got to start with a database. And by that, I mean like somewhere where your tasks and your projects live, some software or some Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is that you or everyone in the organization or within the department or whatever it is can see and understand how to get to that data. That's absolutely crucial. In Ridgeline, we use Notion. And that holds my projects for the quarter. That holds all my tasks for all of my departments. It holds my meeting notes for every meeting that we do. Like, it's the central location for all of that.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, I would say as an operations person, that would be your first step to start with.
Yeah.
Get some centralized location of information.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I tell people all the time, because I'm an Asana evangelist, but at the end of the day, if you just had one wall in your office space and it was filled with Post-it notes, as long as everybody knew that that's where everything went and that's what they can reference, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what platform you use. Like what you said, it's about having that central location that everybody knows this is where you find the information and this is where information goes so that we don't forget it later on. So what are some processes that you think creative and visionary people need to start putting in places in order to disseminate these things down to their operational people and get the things moving the way that things need to be getting moving?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the biggest ones that's most important to start with is your customer journey. What is it? What is the
so good?
What is from start to finish? What does that look like? Because a lot of visionaries or creatives have that vision in their head of what they want it to look like. And then when you start putting it on paper, the ops person goes, oh, well, we're missing this, we're missing that, we're missing this. We have to fill these gaps so that we can have that all the way through. Or sometimes when the visionary writes it out, they start looking at it going, okay, this is not actually realistic. I don't think we can actually do this. So putting those things down as your customer journey is probably your number one process to have. And then after that, you've got your sub processes of how do your sales work? How do your operations work? How do your finance work? Those things are secondary, but your customer journey will dictate all of that and how those run.
That's so good and so true. And it's just a simple, to talk creative for a second, it's just a storyboard of your customer's experience. How did they find you? What did they feel? What was the pain point that they were feeling before they found you? What was their first interaction with you? What did that look like? What was the interaction? All of that stuff, all the way through them being a full-on loyal, repeatable customer. And then how do they feel at that moment? It's their entire storyboard. I love Creativity Inc. for this because they teach about storyboarding in that and how much they use it at Pixar. And it's the same thing. So if I could just speak creative ease for a second, it would be do a storyboard of your customer journey. I know you mentioned Notion as well. I mentioned Asana. We even gave a shout out to Post-it notes at one point. Are there any other tools that you would recommend for managing creative or visionary operations?
I mean, there's so many of them. You can use ClickUp. You can use Monday.com. There's all these different products out there. As far as other systems for, if you're heavy into EOS, there is a software called 90 where a lot of your stuff can be put in there. Kind of. You
talked about meeting notes earlier. What are you guys using for meeting notes? How are you capturing all that?
Sure. So a lot of that is within Notion. I build out what our agenda will be on my meeting card or whatever you want to call it. And then it links directly at the bottom. I put a link into our tasks.
Right.
So it fills out the tasks, and then I will take notes within the tasks or within our meeting topics that are also listed in there as well.
And you guys are also using like an AI recording device for either in person or over the phone or digital meetings as well. What is that, and how does all that work, and why is it important to have that?
We've got a couple, actually. So I have an AI software called Fathom that sits over top of Zoom and Teams. It'll work with any of the virtual meeting softwares, which I think
you're in any session with me, it's always in there.
Exactly. Same. I think it's important to have one of those platforms, whether it's Teams or whatever you want to call it. We're not in the world of everybody goes to the office every single day. We're getting more towards let's go to the office more, but I think the virtual aspect will always be there. The biggest value that I see of having that recording over the Zoom or whatever your virtual meeting space it looks like is the power of AI today is not just to record, but it also pulls out important and key parts of the conversation. Yeah. It can pull out task lists. It can pull out high-level topics. It can tell you how long you talked about something and whether it was important or not, right? There's all these things it can do for you. And it's valuable to have that because there's been numerous times we've done what we call a project verification with Ridgeline. So we win a project, we then go through the estimate, and it's a handoff from our sales department to our operations department. I can't tell you the number of times that they've asked a question going, oh man, I don't remember what was said about this. Well, I can easily pull up my Fathom recording and I don't even have to listen through the whole thing. I can look through the transcript and find that spot and then listen to the 30-second clip that I need to. Yep. And it just creates that ability to go back and see that and have that clarity of data. And then your customer journey is continued properly because now you're fulfilling what was committed to by the sales team to the customer.
Right. So if you're a fan of Mad Men and you're watching the women and the secretaries come into the room, sit in the corner and take notes the entire time, or read this back to me, what was just said, it's essentially a digital version of that now.
Correct.
Where you don't have to pay anyone to come in. If pro hack or tip here, if you have a paid Zoom account, it's absolutely free to use. So.
Yep. It's wonderful. The other side of it that we do have is called Plaud, Plaud, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And it's a recording device that connects to your phone, and it does a mix of just recording, but it also will transcribe it through AI. You can create templates. So if you have a same meeting over and over again, you can create a template of how you want it to transcribe that into a summary or into details, however you want it to look. And then you have an active recording and transcription of in-person meetings as well for the same reason, being able to look back and compare notes, or, hey, we said such and such, this is what we had determined was going to be the directive moving forward, or, hey, you said such and such details, we didn't realize that, but now we have the recording so we can move forward on executing on that. And I think it's important to have those. And in a lot of times too, Plaud is really nice because I can click the button on the back and just speak into it a note that I just want, to remember for later, or some idea that I had come up, or something I need to look at. It's a great task list for that too.
Gotcha.
So that's another one. I think one area that probably with my industry, the construction side, we don't do as often, but needs to be done more, is a customer relationship management tool. Yeah. There's a lot of those out there. HubSpot is obviously the first one that comes to mind, but there's some other ones that are just as good and better depending on what you need. And I think in the bidding world, which is where we live, right? We live in the space of, we're not actively marketing towards our customers. Our customers are sending us projects they want us to bid. Yeah. In that world, we don't always do a lot of customer relationship management, a CRM, right? Because we think, well, we don't need to see that coming in. We don't need, we don't need to spend the expense on that. But the reality is there's a lot of data within that that is helpful for you in making the decisions. Okay, if I get 100 bid requests come in, which ones am I going after? I only have capacity to do 30 of them this month. So what 30 are there going to be? Well, if you have the backup data of who you've worked with before, what the project types were, all those things, you can sift through that data in a CRM and be able to make better decisions and be more strategic about, hey, I have limited time. Let me use this software to tell me where I should put that time to be the most successful.
Yeah, I love that. We use a lot of that. If you've heard me talk about these processes and systems before. We're walking through that all the time with our CRM. One that I specifically use and an ambassador for creative people is VidLead Studio. It is essentially a white label service of Go High Level, specifically designed for creative professionals. Customer service is fantastic and it's super affordable. I would highly recommend it. One last question for you, Peter, and then I want to know where listeners can learn more about the Ops Group. But how do we, if you have the ear of a creative professional or a visionary right now listening to this podcast, how do you convince them to embrace systems and processes?
Well, the first thing I think you would have to say is, you don't need to do it. I can handle it.
There you go.
That is probably the first step, is like, hey, look, this will be on me moving forward.
Right.
I think a lot of the challenge is for creative people or visionaries is they don't want to be locked into a box, and that's completely understandable.
Sure.
Right. And if you had gone back 5 years from today, 5 years previous, probably 98, I'm just pulling that number out of thin air, but probably 98% of your softwares you're locked in for a year or 2 years or whatever it is. It's a long-term contract and it's a big expense to put in up front, et cetera. Right. Mm-hmm. Nowadays we're in the age of month to month. We're in the age of plug and play. Things just pop up on your screen because you clicked, yes, I want to try it. And you've got 14 days or 30 days and it's all right there. Right. So the long-term commitments aren't there. So there's no locked into that box. There's also the aspect of, for the creative and visionary out there, our brains as operation professionals, we are soothed by a good software that works well and that we can implement properly, right? Yeah. And implementation is probably one of the most difficult things to actually make happen.
Yeah.
But operations folks are so detail oriented. We want to see those little details. We want to see the little things. We want to see the minuscule number that's off to the side that some people don't care about. Mm-hmm. Those are sometimes the biggest impact on your organization moving forward.
Right.
And a lot of that data comes from compiling it in a CRM or a system or a software that gives you instant reports. That's probably would be my biggest selling point to a visionary or a creative is, hey, look, you want to get to X. I want to get you to X as reasonably quick as possible, right? We want to get there.
Yeah.
In order to do that, there are decisions that need to be made on a day-to-day basis. If I have to compile all the data from multiple sources, it's going to take us 10, 15 times longer to get there. Mm-hmm. If we implement this software, we can get that data instantly.
Right.
So we're maximizing our capacity while using a tool that exists for us. Yeah. And the best part of it is I can send you the reports and tell you how to read them. You don't have to deal with it at all.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Peter, thank you for your time. So if we have people listening to this that are, want to know more about the Ops Group, where can they learn more about that?
So there's two different ways, actually three if you think about it. If I think about it, rather, if you can go to my website, it's theopsgroupindie.com. Okay. Check that out. Just because it's indie doesn't mean I'm only in the indie market. That's where I'm at right now, but I'm willing to talk to anybody across the nation. Obviously just keep in mind the time difference, but you can go there. You can check me out on LinkedIn or my the page, the Ops Group page on LinkedIn as well. It's just the Ops Group. And then if you want, I am in the process of pushing out a new microcast, I'm calling it, and it's called The Ops Guy. It's right now only on Spotify, but I'm working to get it on other places. But you can find out more about me there too.
I love it. Love it. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today and walking us through how to bridge this gap between creative visionary to operations. Man, it was, I know, really helpful for a lot of us.
For sure, man. Glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Awesome. If you're listening to this and you're interested in having me help you with your creative operations, you can head over to dustinpead.com and click on the Let's Chat button. But if you want just an easy kind of gateway into the things that I'm going to bring to the table, go to dustinpead.com/resources and pick up the ebook Asana for Creative Teams. Now, I know it says Asana, but all the practices that are in it could be used on Notion, or they could be used on our Faithful Friends Post-it notes. It doesn't really matter. It's about the processes that you use. It's not about the platform. It's about the processes. So I think it's like $10 on the website. Go pick up Asana for Creative Teams ebook, and then the Do versus Do worksheet for free at dustinpead.com/resources. I think that's all for this week. I cannot wait to be back with y'all next week on another episode of Creativity Made Easy.